Hey everybody, it's Ronnie. Welcome back to True Chilling Tales, true life stories that I have experienced with a supernatural or paranormal or very unusual twist to them. So today I'm going to be talking about the things that I experienced while living at 409 Lopez Avenue in Port Angeles, Washington. So my friend Erin Marie and I, and you may remember Erin from the fourth video who experienced the black mass of energy with me, she and I had decided to become roommates, and we were house hunting, and we had looked at a handful of houses and didn't really like any of those houses that we saw. And then one day we looked at a house at 409 Lopez Avenue, and we walked in the door. I remember walking in the door of this house, and I remember immediately having this sense of a presence. It was very strong, and it felt like a really good, welcoming, kind presence. And I just remember it saying, this feeling of welcome, welcome. And it just felt like it was the right connection. And I remember saying to Erin, this is the place. And she agreed with me. And so we moved in. I believe it was September 1st, the year 2000. And Erin Marie actually started moving in before I did because of my work schedule. And so I remember our first night in the house, I slept in her bedroom with her, the back bedroom, because I wasn't able to start moving until the next day. So I remember falling asleep in her bed and starting to drift off into sleep, and I remember feeling fingers sort of lightly, it felt like fingers lightly playing with my hair, and I remember kind of sharing that with Erin. And then really shortly after we had moved into the house, I woke up one morning. Erin Marie was still in bed, and I went into the bathroom, and the heat was on. And the heat was it was a small vent in the wall, and it had a little switch that you had to either switch off or on. And so the heat was on, and I remember thinking that was really odd. And so when Erin got up, I asked her, I said, "Did you get up in the night and turn on the heater?" And she said no. And she proceeded to tell me that a few days before, she had had the same experience where she got up, noticed the heat was on, but had assumed I had left it on, and she never mentioned it to me. So we both had this experience, and at that point, we both knew that there was some presence in the house. And also, it was still early September, so the cold crispness of the fall hadn't really set in yet. It was still sort of like the end of summer, and so neither one of us had ever touched the heat anywhere in the house. And so that was kind of interesting. And so one day, shortly after that, we were at the landlord's. Now, the landlords actually lived next door, which typically doesn't seem like it would be an ideal situation, but in this case it really was, because the landlords were amazing people, Keith and Colleen. They were just really great, and some of you watching this video may know Mary Dotson, and Keith and Colleen are Mary's grandparents, and at the time Mary actually lived with them, so they all lived next door, and they really treated Erin Marie and I like members of their own family, so it was a really ideal situation. And so one day Erin Marie and I were over there, and we were talking with Keith, and I kind of casually said to him, "So, have any of your former tenants ever talked about unusual things happening in the house?" And I remember him kind of going like, "Well, what do you mean?" And we told him about our experience with the heater. The interesting thing is that he proceeded to tell us that years before, when they first moved into their home and before they ever bought the house that we lived in, when they moved in, there was an older couple, that lived in that house, and they were Jehovah's Witnesses. And the man's name who lived there, his name was Charlie. And so Keith explained that a young woman had come forth within the church claiming that Charlie had molested her while she was a child. And so Charlie evidently denied this claim, claimed that he was innocent, but he couldn't take the controversy and the backlash and the shame that came towards him within the church. And so he actually went out to the shed in the backyard and committed suicide. So Erin Marie and I both believed that this man was who was in our house. And even though there were those allegations of him molesting this girl, we didn't know if it was true or not, and he denied it. And it wasn't for me to judge. All I knew is that there was a presence in the house, and it was a benevolent presence. It never felt scary, and it never felt threatening or anything like that. So once I had a sense of who this was, I used to talk to him and just kind of to say, I know who you are. I know that you're there, and we know, basically just to acknowledge him, because I felt like he wanted us to know that he was there. So sometimes I would connect with him, I would send him telepathic thoughts, and other times if I was alone and if I felt that he was around, I would actually verbalize with him. So there wasn't a lot of crazy activity in the house. It was just sort of once in a while, and it was very subtle. But outside of that, there were some other really unusual things that happened. Some of you watching this may remember Miles. Miles was a young man who, like Charlie, was accused of a sex crime that he denied, and so he actually ended up going to jail. And Miles was somebody who was an acquaintance of mine. I didn't know him really well, but he had come over to my place for a few parties, and so I just knew him that way. And I remember that he had gone to jail, and I remember that he committed suicide, and it was a really sad time for a lot of the young people in the community, because he had a lot of friends, and a lot of his friends were mutual friends of mine. But I remember after he committed suicide and after his death, there was this real sort of strange period of time where really unusual things were happening, and there was a really kind of weird feeling. And I remember other people having their own experiences outside of mine, away from my house, and people sharing them with me. And unfortunately, I don't remember any of the details, but I remember dialogue happening with people that I knew. And the things that I experienced, the first thing that I experienced was that I was in my kitchen, and I had a few people over. I don't remember who was there, but I remember that I had at least one or two friends over, and we were in the kitchen, and the kitchen had a big window that faced the backyard, and then beyond the backyard was the alley. And we were in the house, and we heard this terrible shrieking sound. I mean, it was just like a shrieking, wailing. It was really eerie, and it's exactly how I would imagine a banshee to sound. I mean, that's exactly what it sounded like to me. And it was this really loud sound, and it went through the alley, basically. It just quickly traveled down the alley. I was able to follow the noise. And that was the first time I heard it. And the second time I heard it, I had quite a few friends over. I remember a handful of friends being over. I believe that my friend Beth was over. I'm almost certain that my friend Chris was over. And both Beth and Chris were friends of mine that used to hang out with me a lot at that time at my house. And so I remember a handful of us being out in the front, on the front porch, and hearing the same exact noise again. And it came from the same direction, down the alley, this loud, shrieking, wailing sound. And it wasn't anything that was attached to a vehicle. There was no other noise, and it traveled at a highly unusual rate of speed, and it was definitely not an animal, and it was definitely not a human being. So I remember us hearing it, and I remember us talking about it afterwards. And I actually used to refer to it as the Nightbird, and I had this unsettling feeling that it was related to Miles' death. I don't think it was him, but I just remember feeling like it was somehow related, and it was really eerie. Another time, I was in the living room of my house with a few friends, and we heard a thud on the front window, and when we went out, and it was at night, and we went outside to look, and there was nothing there. There was no ball, there was no, nothing there. So I remember that was really strange as well. So in the time that I lived at that house, I had three roommates at three separate times. So first Erin Marie and I had moved in, and then she moved out, and my friend Curtis moved in for a time, and then after Curtis moved out, my friend Amber moved in. And I don't really remember a lot happening. I don't even know if Curtis actually experienced anything there. Curtis, if you're watching this, and if you have any memories that maybe I've forgotten or that I didn't know about, I'd be really interested to hear about that. But when my friend Amber moved in, she did have some experiences, and I had some experiences while she was there. The first one being that I came home from work one day, and I had a painting, a small painting of Cher, that my friend Molly had picked up for me at the Goodwill. And it was like somebody local had painted this beautiful portrait of Cher on this thin piece of canvas, and I had it hanging in the far corner of my bedroom wall. And below the painting was a lamp which sat on my dresser. So I came home from work one day, and this painting was placed perfectly on the floor, so that when I walked into the room, it was facing me, just perfectly laying there. And it's possible that the painting could have fallen because I didn't have it tacked up. I think I had it taped behind, in the back of the painting. But if it would have fallen, it was so thin that it would have just probably, it would have just sort of either fallen down and landed on top of the lamp, or it would have just slid straight down the wall and gone behind the dresser. So Amber, when I asked her about it, she said that she hadn't touched it, and I believed her, and I believe her to this day that she didn't touch it. So that was really strange. And Amber actually just recently reminded me of this. I had forgotten about this, but we used to watch the John Edwards show together a lot. And for those of you who don't know, John Edwards is a medium who had his own TV show where he would communicate with people's deceased loved ones and relay messages to them. So Amber and I were watching this show. It was on late at night, and I was snuggled up in my chair with my cats, and she was watching it. And her daughter Cheyenne, who lived with us, was gone with her father. So everybody that was in the house, we were all there together, and we were watching the show. And Amber said she'd made some comment to the effect of that she either wished she would have, or that she didn't know if she would have any deceased loved ones who would want to communicate with her. And as soon as she said that, we heard a thud in the bathroom, a really loud thud, and it sounded like something large had dropped into the bathroom sink. So we both got up into the bathroom, which was really small, and there was nothing in the sink, there was nothing in the tub, nothing had fallen over, there was nothing that we could see that was out of place, and she thought that was sort of like a sign that somebody was communicating with her. It's probably Charlie. And Amber also told me that one morning, it was like a Saturday morning, she woke up. Well, she lived with her daughter. I don't know if I actually made that clear, but when Amber moved in with me, it was Amber and her daughter Cheyenne. And Cheyenne was just a toddler. She was like 3 or 4, really young. And they woke up one morning on a Saturday morning, and Cheyenne said to Amber, "Mommy, who's that man?" And Amber said, "What man?" And Cheyenne said, "Never mind." And then she turned over to face her mother and curled up in a ball. And so when Amber told me that, I thought for certain that it was Charlie, that Cheyenne had seen him, standing there in the room. And I imagine that was kind of eerie for her, and it was kind of eerie hearing about that. But the experiences with the presence in the house really sort of dwindled down after I kind of found out who he was and would kind of talk to him. But again, I relayed with you some things would still happen. And when we were getting ready to move, Amber actually told me that she felt fingers playing with her hair, like one of her last nights there. And Amber actually, her bedroom was Erin's bedroom, the room that I had experienced that. And I said to her, well, he must just be saying goodbye. So I actually, towards the end, I used to pray for Charlie, and I used to actually tell him, you need to go to the light. Because my understanding of ghosts, maybe different of yours. I mean, everybody has a different theory and different thoughts on it. My perception is that ghosts are spirits that, people who have deceased who are either confused and they don't know that they're deceased, or they are sort of afraid to cross over because of a belief that they held in life. So, for example, Charlie committed suicide, so he may not even have realized that he died, or he may have had this belief that if you commit suicide, you're going to hell. So he was, for whatever reason, he was stuck in this dimension between the physical world and the spiritual world. And so I used to pray for him, and I used to tell him, Charlie, you are deceased. You need to go to the light. You need to go to your Creator. And you have loved ones. Your loved ones are waiting for you on the other side. You need to go to the light. And so Mary, who I told you about, Mary Dotson, who lived next door, she actually moved into the house after we totally moved out. And she said that she never experienced anything there. So now, 10 years later, 409 Lopez Avenue, it's still there, and hopefully Charlie is not. Hopefully he's at peace. So those are the things that I experienced at 409 Lopez Avenue. I hope you found it to be interesting. Stay tuned for the next installment of my series of videos. The next one is a really good one, so keep your eyes peeled for it. And until then, be well. Take care.